TIFU by pretending to know sign language to impress a girl and accidentally starting a fight at a wedding. This happened last weekend, and I've spent the better part of the week hiding in shame and rethinking every life decision I've ever made. I was invited to a wedding of a former college buddy. He's a great guy, and his now wife is awesome, but I hadn't seen either of them in years. The invite came out of nowhere, and it was one of those "oh hey, we had a few great times in college so let's invite the whole crew" type of deals. I RSVP'd yes mostly because I needed to get out of my apartment and do something that didn't involve Netflix and silently screaming into my pillow. So, I show up at the wedding solo. Open bar, outdoor ceremony, good vibes all around. Everyone's dressed to the nines, and I'm feeling slightly out of place because most of the people there clearly have their lives together. I fake a few conversations about my consulting work, I am between jobs, and eventually, I head to the bar. That's where I see her, let's call her Emma. She's stunning in that effortlessly cool way, like she just wandered in from an indie film set. She's talking to a small group of people and laughing, and I'm instantly convinced I need to talk to her or regret it forever. I wait until she's alone, then approach with my best casual confidence, which probably looked like a cross between a toddler learning to walk and a guy trying to sell you solar panels. We start talking, and it's going surprisingly well. She's funny, smart, and easy to talk to. Then she notices a guy across the lawn signing to a woman and says something like, "I always wished I learned ASL. It's such a beautiful language." Now, here's where my lizard brain completely takes the wheel and crashes the car. I panic lie. "Oh, I say, I actually know sign language." Why? Why did I say that? I do not know sign language. The only exposure I've had is one semester in college that I dropped halfway through and a few TikToks I didn't even finish watching. But my mouth had spoken, and now I was in it. Her eyes light up. No way. That's so cool. At this point, the only correct move would have been to admit I exaggerated. Instead, I double down like a moron. "Yeah, it's been a while since I used it, but I still remember a lot." She points to the guy signing across the yard. What are they saying? I am now standing in front of this woman, who I very much want to impress, staring across a lawn at two deaf guests having what is probably a very normal conversation. I squint, nod like I'm deeply analyzing, and start making things up. They're talking about the ceremony. He's saying he liked the vows. She's saying she cried. Real sweet. Emma smiles. That's adorable. We keep chatting, but now she keeps pointing out more people signing and asking what they're saying. This wedding apparently has a pretty decent-sized deaf community, which is great for them and terrible for me because I am in full-on improv mode. I start making up the most generic conversations possible. He's asking where the bathroom is. She's saying the cake is amazing. He's talking about going hiking next weekend. Emma is delighted. I am dying inside. But the real catastrophe hits about an hour later at the reception. The music is going, people are dancing, and Emma and I are hanging near the back with a group of guests. One of the guys from earlier, the one who was signing, walks over with a friend and makes direct eye contact with me. Then he signs something fast. I freeze. Emma looks at me expectantly. So does the deaf guy. And his friend. Everyone is watching me. I feel like a squirrel caught in traffic. So, what do? I attempt to sign something back. Something I vaguely remember from a TikTok. It is supposed to be "nice to meet you," but I have no idea what my hands are actually doing. The guy's expression changes. He signs something faster, more intense. His friend steps in, starts signing too. I try to nod like everything's fine, but the tension is rapidly building. Suddenly, another guest, a woman who is fluent in ASL, comes rushing over. She signs with the two men, then turns to me and says, "What the hell did you just say to him?" I want to disappear. I want to be anywhere else. I stammer something about misunderstanding, but she is not having it. You signed something about his mother and a pineapple. And then something extremely offensive about his sister. Do you even know what you're saying? No, I whisper. I was just trying to say, nice to meet you. She stares at me like I kicked a puppy. The two men look somewhere between furious and offended. One walks off, shaking his head. Emma turns to me, horrified. You said you knew sign language. I may have exaggerated a little. She just walks away. I am now alone, at a wedding where I have accidentally insulted at least 2 deaf guests and publicly revealed myself to be a fraud and a fool. The bride found out later and was surprisingly chill about it, mostly because she thought it was hilarious once the initial awkwardness wore off. The guy I offended, thankfully, accepted an apology once someone explained how colossally stupid I am and that I meant no harm. But Emma? Yeah, she's not returning my texts. And I probably deserve that. Let this be a lesson, never lie about knowing sign language. Or anything, really. But especially not that. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps the content grow and motivates me to create even more great videos. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new uploads. By the way, I'm curious, when do you usually watch my videos? While working, studying, or just relaxing at home? Let me know in the comments, I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for your support. TIFU. By getting way too invested in my neighbor's cat's secret life. This happened about 3 weeks ago and it's just now starting to unravel fully, but the full scope of my stupidity didn't really hit me until last night. So, I live in a pretty quiet suburban neighborhood where everyone mostly keeps to themselves. I work from home, so I see more of the neighborhood than most people probably do. A few months ago, I started seeing this chunky orange cat lounging in my backyard pretty regularly. I didn't think much of it at first, it's a nice spot, he probably just liked the sun. But then he started coming every day around 11 a.m., like clockwork. Just struts into my yard, plops down on the same patch of grass, rolls around, occasionally chases a leaf or bug, then leaves around 2 p.m. After about a week, I got curious. I named him Garfield because he was orange and always looked vaguely disappointed. Eventually, he got comfortable enough that he'd come up to the sliding door and meow at me. I gave him some tuna once, and after that we were best friends. It became our thing. I'd leave a little tuna or treats on the porch, and he'd nap near me while I worked. He never wore a collar, so I figured he was a stray that just made his rounds. Cue my descent into madness. One afternoon, I decided to follow him. Not in a creepy way, okay, kind of in a creepy way, but I just wanted to see where he went. He sauntered down the street, made a right, and walked up to the porch of a perfectly average house about 5 doors down. He meowed once, and a nice-looking middle-aged woman opened the door and let him in like it was no big deal. My brain short-circuited. This fat little traitor had a home. A family. Probably a whole second set of humans who also gave him tuna and treats. I felt betrayed. But more than that, I got weirdly obsessed. Who was this woman? Did she know her cat had a second life with me? Did Garfield love her more? So I did what any sane adult would do. I started a detailed journal documenting Garfield's daily routine. I noted what time he arrived and left, what snacks he seemed to like best, whether he looked particularly content or annoyed. I even started playing different music on my speakers to see if he had preferences. He seems to hate jazz. Loves ambient piano. A few weeks into this bizarre science experiment, I noticed something odd. One day, Garfield didn't show up at all. Then the next. Then the next. I tried to tell myself maybe he was just chilling at his real home. But on day 4 of the Garfield drought, I panicked. I ended up walking over to the house I saw him enter weeks earlier. I knocked on the door and immediately realized I hadn't thought through what I was going to say. When the woman opened the door, I blurted out, "Hi, I think your cat is missing?" She looked confused and then said, "Do you mean Mr. Pickles?" I had to bite my tongue so hard not to laugh. Mr. Pickles. She explained that yes, he was their cat, but he hadn't been missing, he'd just been acting weird lately, like he didn't want to go outside. I told her about how he'd been visiting my yard every day for weeks and how we sort of bonded. She laughed and said, "Oh, so you're the tuna guy." Turns out Mr. Pickles had been coming home smelling like fish, and they couldn't figure out why. I was kind of relieved to hear they weren't mad. We ended up talking for a while and it was surprisingly not awkward. Fast forward to last week. Mr. Pickles starts visiting again, but now he's clearly got some expectations. He meows like he owns the place, scratches at the sliding door if I'm late with snacks, and refuses to eat unless it's from a specific blue bowl I once used. He also started bringing gifts, a dead mouse on my doormat one day, then a dismembered bird wing. I appreciated the sentiment, but still. Anyway, last night is where the actual F-up happened. I was having a date over for dinner, a woman I've been seeing casually for a month or so. We're cooking together in the kitchen, laughing, things are going well. Then Mr. Pickles shows up at the sliding door, absolutely screaming. I ignore it, thinking he'll go away. He doesn't. He's pawing at the glass, yowling like I haven't fed him in months. My date asks if everything's okay, and I try to casually explain that a neighborhood cat visits sometimes. She walks over to the door, coos at him, and says, should we let him in? Before I can say no, she slides the door open and he bolts inside like a feline missile. Heads straight to the cabinet where I keep the tuna, meowing frantically. I try to shoo him out, but he's doing his pathetic hungry dance. She thinks it's hilarious and gives him a can of tuna. He scarfs it down, then jumps on the couch like he owns the place. Here's where it goes fully off the rails. After dinner, we're cuddling on the couch, and Mr. Pickles jumps up and plops himself right between us. No chill, no hesitation. He curls up, purrs like an engine, and I kid you not, he glares at her. She laughs it off but says, "Wow, he's really possessive of you, huh?" I try to make a joke about being his second boyfriend or something, but she gets weirdly quiet. Then she asks, "How often is he here?" I answer honestly. Pretty much every day. She asks, "Do you feed him?" Again, honesty, yeah, I give him tuna sometimes. She looks at me like I just confessed to a war crime. So you have a pet cat that's not actually your cat, who comes into your home daily, you feed him, let him inside, and you never mentioned it until now? I try to explain that I didn't mean to adopt him, but she's clearly freaked out by how nonchalant I am about this double life I have with a stranger's cat. She says something like, "I don't know if I'm comfortable dating someone who hides whole pets." Long story short, she left early. Mr. Pickles is currently asleep on my pillow like nothing happened. So yeah, I guess I accidentally adopted a cat and also ruined a budding relationship because I was too deep in the cat side quest to notice I'd crossed into lunatic territory. On the plus side, I learned something important about myself. Apparently, I'm the kind of guy who will build an emotional connection with someone else's pet and document it in a spreadsheet like a deranged cat scientist. I now have a Google Calendar called Pickle Time. So this happened a few months ago, but the consequences are still very much unfolding. I hit 29M, started a new job at a mid-sized tech company that prides itself on being quirky. Think open office plans, kombucha on tap, and a Slack channel just for ironic memes about raccoons. I had just moved from the Midwest to the Pacific Northwest, and I was determined to leave behind the boring guy with zero personality vibe I seemed to radiate in my last job. So I did what any rational adult trying to reinvent themselves would do, I gave myself an accent. It wasn't a big plan at first. On my first day, I introduced myself to my team and, for reasons I cannot explain, maybe nerves, maybe a deep-seated desire to be interesting, I decided to say hello with a British accent. Not a posh Londoner thing, more like a laid-back guy from somewhere around Manchester? Or Liverpool? I don't even know. I've only been to England once and it was a layover. The problem was that people loved it. My coworkers were immediately intrigued. "Oh, where in the UK are you from?" someone asked. And I, fully panicking, replied, just outside Leeds." I have never been outside Leeds. I don't even know what Leeds looks like. But I was in it now. People kept asking me questions. One person said they had family in Leeds and asked if I knew a specific neighborhood. I gave them a vague "I might have been there" and quickly changed the subject. Days turned into weeks, and I was living a full double life. My coworkers would often try to test me with British slang. They'd say things like "Oi bruv, fancy a cheeky Nando's," and I'd just sort of laugh and nod, praying they wouldn't catch on. Then HR had the brilliant idea to do a company-wide Culture Appreciation Day where people could share stories, food, or traditions from where they're from. And guess who got asked to do a presentation on British culture? Yep. Me. I tried to dodge it, saying I wasn't much of a presenter, but the HR person was insistent and said it would be so cool to hear a real Brit share their experience. She even got me Union Jack napkins and a teapot. So I did what any completely sane and logical person would do. I went full steam ahead. I made scones, bought them from a bakery and claimed I made them, wore a tweed jacket, and gave a 10-minute PowerPoint presentation with titles like "YT is Life" and "The Unspoken Rules of Queuing." I even made a joke about still driving on the left side of the road in the parking lot, which landed pretty well. I was weirdly proud of myself. Afterwards, someone asked if I missed my family back home. Without missing a beat, I said, "Yeah, especially my mum. I don't call my mom Mum. She's from Nebraska." Everything would have probably faded out into a mildly strange but funny footnote of my life if it hadn't been for Phil. Phil is a software engineer who had been working remotely from the London office and had just transferred to our location in Seattle. Real British. Real accent. Real problem. He was assigned to my team. The very first day, we're introduced and he says, "You're from Leeds, yeah? What part?" I felt my soul leave my body. I mumbled something about West Side and tried to shake his hand and walk away. But Phil was chatty. Worse, he was friendly. And he was excited to talk to a fellow Brit in this sea of Americans. Our boss thought it was hilarious and kept making jokes like, "Great, now we've got double the tea drinking sarcasm and you two must have a secret language or something." Phil invited me out for drinks. I couldn't say no. At the pub, it was just the two of us, and he started getting suspicious real quick. He asked what school I went to. I made one up. He asked if I followed Leeds United. I said yes. He asked what I thought of the last match. I said, "Crazy game, huh?" He leaned in and said, "Mate, you're not from Leeds, are you?" I nearly choked on my Guinness. I tried to laugh it off, but he wasn't laughing. "What's your actual story?" he asked. I confessed. The whole stupid thing. How I just wanted to seem more interesting. How I thought it would be a one-off thing. How it spiraled. Phil didn't say anything for a while. Then he burst out laughing. "You absolute lunatic," he said, still laughing. I thought maybe I was off the hook. Maybe he'd keep my secret. But of course, it wasn't that simple. The next day at work, during a team meeting, he says, loudly, "By the way, did you know our mate from Leeds here has never actually been to Leeds?" Dead silence. Then someone said, "Wait, what?" And the whole thing unraveled. I tried to laugh it off and explain that it was a joke that got out of hand, but some people were genuinely weirded out. One person even said, "That's kind of sociopathic behavior." HR called me in to have a conversation about trust and authenticity in the workplace. They weren't even mad, just deeply confused. To make things worse, I'd been speaking in the fake accent for months. And now I had to transition out of it, which was even weirder. People would stop me in the hallway and say, "Wait, are you doing the American voice now?" I became a meme. someone made a Slack emoji of my face with a British flag behind it. Another person started calling me faux liver twist. But the absolute worst part? The HR woman who organized Culture Day, who I had kind of started seeing on the down low, completely ghosted me. I mean, I get it. I lied. A lot. Over tea and scones. Now I'm just trying to survive the fallout. I've become that guy. People introduce me to new hires like, "This is my name. Ask him about his time in Leeds, *wink star dot." I've learned my lesson. No more fake accents. No more fake identities. Just boring old me from Des Moines, trying to avoid eye contact with Phil, who now ends every meeting by saying, "Cheers, mate," and winking at me like the smug bastard he is. TIFU by trying to impress my date with a homemade dinner and almost burning down my house in the process. I've never been much of a chef. My idea of cooking is throwing a frozen pizza into the oven or microwaving a meal that looks like it came out of a science experiment. I'm pretty sure if you put me in the kitchen with a recipe, it's like handing a monkey a typewriter and hoping it writes Shakespeare. But I'm also someone who hates to feel like a failure, especially in the presence of someone I want to impress. So when I met someone who was into cooking, I figured I could step up my game and make her something nice. You know, to show her that I can be an interesting, multifaceted guy who's capable of more than just a basic Netflix and chill evening. I'd been talking to Rachel for a few weeks, and we had a pretty good vibe going. She had mentioned that she loved homemade meals, especially ones where you could really taste the effort. We had gone on a few dates already, and we were getting along really well. So I decided that for our next date, I would cook her a fancy dinner. I did a little research on Google, watched some YouTube tutorials, and even called my mom for advice. I was feeling pretty confident about it, and even though I had never actually cooked a full meal from scratch before, I figured, how hard could it be? I settled on making a classic Italian dish, homemade chicken Alfredo with a side of garlic bread. It sounded fancy enough to impress, but simple enough that I could execute it without too many issues. Little did I know, I was about to unleash a chain of events that would make Gordon Ramsay cry. First, I went shopping for ingredients. I had never shopped for such a specific meal before, so I wandered around the store aimlessly like a lost soul. I couldn't find some of the things I needed, and when I did, I didn't even know what half of the brands meant. I ended up buying the cheapest stuff I could find, pre-sliced chicken breasts, a jar of Alfredo sauce, and a bag of pre-minced garlic. If you looked at the ingredients and then looked at my face, you'd probably think I was some sort of alien who had just landed on Earth and didn't understand the basic concept of food. Still, I was optimistic. I got home, and the first thing I did was open a bottle of wine, because obviously, if you're going to cook for a date, you need wine to make you seem sophisticated. I poured myself a glass and watched a couple more cooking videos to make sure I didn't screw things up. I'm no fool, though. I wasn't about to be one of those people who can't cook pasta without burning it, so I set a timer for everything. Everything started off well. I boiled the water for the pasta, and it actually boiled without me burning it. The chicken, on the other hand, was a disaster. I tried to pan-sear it like the videos showed me, but for some reason, it kept sticking to the pan and turning into this sad, charred mess. I tried to salvage it by cutting it into smaller pieces and putting it back in the pan, but by the time it was cooked, it looked like something you'd find on the bottom of an old shoe. At this point, I was starting to get nervous, but I powered through. The garlic bread, at least, seemed like it was going to be easy. You just put it in the oven, right? So I did that. And then I totally forgot about it for like 15 minutes. When I finally remembered, I opened the oven door, and the smell of burnt bread hit me like a freight train. The edges were blackened, and the center was just soggy. It was at that moment I knew I was going to need a miracle. I managed to salvage the chicken and pasta somehow, though it was a bit too dry for my liking. I then poured the jar of Alfredo sauce over the mess, which helped a little, but it was definitely more substance than flavor. The garlic bread was a lost cause, so I just put the remains in a bowl and hoped Rachel wouldn't notice. I decided to set the table and light some candles to create a nice ambience. In my head, I was picturing a cozy, romantic evening where we would enjoy a delicious homemade meal together. Reality, however, was looking much more bleak. The chicken Alfredo looked like something you'd find at a gas station diner at 3 a.m. The burnt garlic bread was sitting there in all its glory, and my bottle of wine was already half gone because I had been drinking away my anxiety. Finally, Rachel arrived. She was as beautiful as I remembered, and she smiled when she walked in, which was a relief. I greeted her with a hug, and she complimented the candles, which, honestly, was probably the only redeeming part of the whole evening. We sat down to eat, and I watched her take the first bite of the chicken Alfredo. Her face didn't change at first, which was a good sign. Maybe I had done something right, after all. Then came the silence. She took another bite, and then another. Finally, she looked at me, trying to be polite but clearly struggling to hide her discomfort. "It's interesting," she said, a little too diplomatically. I could feel the sweat starting to bead on my forehead. "Interesting? What do you mean by interesting?" I asked, hoping that it wasn't a code word for "this is awful." "It's different." But in a good way, she added quickly, probably sensing that I was about to have a full-on meltdown. I tried to continue the conversation, but my nerves were starting to get the best of me. I felt like I was about to pass out. I asked her how the garlic bread was, and she hesitated for a moment before saying, "It's a little crunchy. But I'm sure you were going for that." At that point, I knew I had to come clean. I couldn't keep pretending that I was some kind of culinary genius. "Rachel, I'm so sorry. This is probably the worst meal I've ever made in my life," I admitted. "I really wanted to impress you, but I have no idea what I'm doing in the kitchen. I just followed some recipes and hoped for the best." To my surprise, she burst out laughing. "Oh my God, thank you for saying that. I thought I was the only one who was struggling to keep a straight face." We both laughed for a while, and honestly, it was a huge relief. The tension was broken, and we were able to just enjoy each other's company despite my catastrophic cooking attempt. After dinner, we ended up ordering pizza, and it was probably the best decision of the night. We still saw each other a few more times after that, and eventually, I did cook for her again. But this time, I went to a cooking class first and actually learned how to make something that didn't come from a jar or a box. Turns out, you can impress people without trying to fake it. So yeah, TIFU by thinking I could impress my date with my non-existent cooking skills, and almost burning down my kitchen in the process. But at least I didn't burn the house down, and I learned that it's okay to admit when you don't know what you're doing. TIFU by accidentally turning my first date into an emergency room visit. So, this all started about 3 weeks ago. I'm a 27-year-old guy who's been on the dating scene for a while. I'm not necessarily socially awkward, but I'm not the smoothest guy either. Anyway, I've been talking to this girl, let's call her Jess, for about a month on a dating app. We had some good conversations, exchanged some funny memes, and even made plans to grab coffee at a local cafe. For once, I felt like things were actually going well, and I was genuinely looking forward to this date. On the day of the date, I was nervous. I hadn't been on a real date in a while, and I really wanted to make a good impression. I spent a solid hour getting ready, showering, picking out a nice shirt, making sure my hair looked presentable. After all, this was my chance to make a great first impression. Jess and I had agreed to meet at 4 p.m., so I showed up early to make sure I had everything in order. I had a couple of minutes to sit down and collect myself before she arrived. Now, you might be wondering, what could possibly go wrong at a coffee shop? Well, buckle up because this is where things take a sharp turn. Jess shows up, and honestly, she's even more attractive in person than in her photos. We exchange pleasantries, and everything seems to be going great. We chat about our jobs, mutual interests, and the usual first date small talk. The coffee shop is quiet, the atmosphere is relaxed, and we're both having a good time. About 20 minutes into the date, Jess gets up to go to the restroom. I take a sip of my coffee and, for whatever reason, my brain decides it's a great idea to do a quick stretch to loosen up. I do this weird, half-standing, half-sitting stretch that was supposed to feel good. It was at that moment, as I extended my arms above my head and tried to reach for the sky, that I made a crucial mistake. I didn't realize there was a small sugar packet on the table in front of me. When I stretched, I knocked it over. The sugar packet, of course, spilled, but here's where things get worse. The sugar packet wasn't just any sugar packet, it was a sugar packet filled with the most industrial-strength sugar possible, the kind that could probably fuel an entire sugar high for a small city. The sugar spilled everywhere. It wasn't just on the table, it somehow found its way into my coffee. I didn't notice this at first. I just sat there, in that embarrassing, stretched-out position, with my arms still raised. Jess comes back to the table and looks at me like I've just lost my mind. I try to casually lower my arms and pretend nothing happened, but of course, she noticed the mess. She sits down, we both start laughing, and I try to play it off like it's no big deal. But, in reality, I'm panicking inside because I know that spilling sugar in a coffee isn't just a minor inconvenience, it's a disaster waiting to happen. So, I reach for a napkin to clean up the mess, but as I do that, I accidentally knock over my coffee cup. Coffee goes everywhere. I'm talking full-on disaster mode. The coffee splashes onto the table, onto my shirt, and even onto the floor. Jess jumps back in surprise, and I can see that she's trying not to laugh, but she's definitely holding back a smile. The awkwardness is palpable. At this point, I'm mortified. I have this giant coffee stain on my shirt, and the sugar has now become a sticky mess all over the table. I'm frantically grabbing napkins, trying to clean up the mess, but the more I try to fix it, the worse it gets. My shirt looks like a crime scene. The napkins are just absorbing the coffee, but the sugar isn't going anywhere. Jess, being the kind soul that she is, offers to help me clean up, but as she reaches for the sugar spill, I do something that no one should ever do on a first date. I don't know why I did it, but in that moment of panic, I thought I could save face by offering a fix of my own. I reached for the creamer on the table and poured it into the sugar spill to try and neutralize it. The creamer did nothing except make the sugar stick even more. Now, instead of a coffee and sugar mess, we have a full-on cream and sugar catastrophe. My shirt is beyond saving, my hands are covered in stickiness, and Jess is now staring at me like I've completely lost my mind. I can't even make a joke about it because I'm genuinely horrified. Jess is trying to stifle her laughter, but I can see she's having a hard time. I attempt to salvage the situation by apologizing profusely, but it's clear the date has gone completely sideways. To make matters worse, the barista, who has been silently watching this whole debacle, decides now is the perfect time to come over and ask if I need help. I think she's trying to be nice, but it just makes everything worse. She suggests that I clean up the mess with some wet towels from the bathroom, which is all well and good, except that the towels aren't really going to fix the sticky situation I've created for myself. At this point, Jess looks like she's about to lose it. I'm sure it's not because she's having a good time, but more because she feels sorry for me. I'm a mess. I've ruined what could have been a nice, simple coffee date with an out-of-control disaster of a spill. So, I do what any self-respecting person would do in my position. I suggest we get out of there before the situation gets any worse. Jess agrees, and we awkwardly leave the cafe. As we're walking to our cars, I'm trying to think of anything that could redeem the situation. But nothing comes to mind. My shirt is ruined, my pride is in tatters, and I feel like the world's biggest idiot. We part ways, and Jess sends me a text later that night. It's short and to the point, but at least it's not a complete rejection. She says, "I had a good time, but I think we're better off as friends. I'll let you know if I ever need a laugh." So, yeah, I pretty much ruined my first date by turning it into an emergency room-worthy coffee disaster. I spent the rest of the night scrubbing my shirt, but there was no saving it. Jess and I are no longer talking, and I can't blame her. If I were her, I'd probably think twice about dating a guy who can't even drink coffee without causing a catastrophe. TLDR, tried to have a nice first date at a coffee shop, accidentally spilled sugar and coffee everywhere, made it worse by pouring creamer onto the mess, ruined my shirt, and ended up being dumped via text after Jess witnessed my disaster. TIFU by accidentally sending a video of me fighting a goose naked to the entire company Slack channel. This happened 2 days ago and the fallout is still spiraling. I work for a mid-sized tech company that's remote first, so most of our communication happens via Slack. We have channels for everything, serious ones for projects, chill ones for memes and pets, and then there's #random, which is like a lawless digital frontier where anything goes. Or so I thought. So here's some context. My girlfriend and I recently moved into a small lake house I inherited from my grandfather. It's quiet, surrounded by trees and, unfortunately, geese. The geese have taken over the backyard like little feathery tyrants. I've had confrontations with them before, but nothing serious, until Wednesday morning. I'd just come out of the shower, towel barely hanging on, and went out to grab the coffee I left in my car. I didn't think anyone was around. I didn't think the geese would be out. I didn't think my neighbor, who's trying to become a YouTuber and has one of those constantly rolling driveway cameras, would catch the entire thing. But of course, all of those things were true. As I'm walking barefoot through the dewy grass, one of the geese comes honking out from behind the bush like it's been waiting for me. This wasn't a normal goose. It had the look of a creature that's fought wars. Its neck was scarred. Its eyes were full of vengeance. It had beef with me. I panicked, dropped the towel, and grabbed the first thing I could, a pool noodle. What followed was 4 straight minutes of me and the goose in a full-blown brawl. I tried to chase it off. It flew at me. I flailed the noodle like a man possessed. I yelled. I slipped. At one point, I fell completely into a kiddie pool, naked, screaming, while the goose stood on the edge like it had just vanquished its greatest foe. My neighbor's camera caught everything. And for reasons I will never understand, he decided to make a cinematic edit of the video and texted it to me later that day, complete with dramatic music and slow motion. I opened it at my desk, laughed so hard I cried, and here's where I really messed up. I thought, you know what? My coworkers will love this. So I dragged the video file from my texts to my desktop, and then from my desktop to what I thought was a private DM with my work friend Sarah. But Slack has this fun little feature where if you click wrong by even a few pixels, your drag and drop can go to the entire channel instead. Guess what I did? Yeah. Instead of DMing Sarah, I dropped a video titled battle_with_goose_final.mov directly into #random, a channel with over 250 active employees, including our CEO, who loves to occasionally pop in and react to cat memes. I realized it the moment I hit send. The video preview popped up instantly, thumbnail frozen on me mid-air, noodle in hand, very much not clothed. I screamed. Then I panicked and tried to delete it, but Slack takes a few seconds to process that, just long enough for several people to see it. One coworker actually commented "Is this real?" before I could get the file down. Another replied with the eyes emoji. Then someone added a goose emoji reaction. Then it was game over. I frantically messaged Sarah, "Do not watch the video I just sent." She replied, "Too late. I'm crying." And then, "I think you're going to be a legend." That's not the comfort I was hoping for. Within an hour, someone had made a meme of me, labeled Sir Honks-a-lot versus the Naked Noodler. Someone else added it to our company Notion page under Cultural Highlights. I got a message from a director in marketing that said, "Let me know if you're okay with us using this in a campaign, internal only, I promise." To top it all off, the CEO reacted with 3 emojis, a goose, a flame, and a trophy. By the end of the day, HR scheduled a quick chat for the following morning. I barely slept. I rehearsed my explanation. I considered quitting and joining the geese in exile. When I joined the call, the HR rep looked like she was trying really hard not to laugh. She said, "Well, obviously we don't encourage accidental nudity in professional spaces, but it's clear this wasn't intentional. That said, let's keep things PG from now on." She paused and added, "Also, please tell me the goose is okay." So, I still have a job. Somehow. But I can't open Slack without seeing someone referencing the Battle of Lake Noodle. People have started changing their profile pictures to goose heads. Our company's unofficial Zoom waiting music is now that same dramatic soundtrack my neighbor used. Sarah had a mug made that says, "I survived the goose fight of 25 and shipped it to my house." The worst part? The goose came back yesterday. It stared at me through the sliding glass door. No blinking. Just silent judgment. I know it remembers. I know it's planning something. And now my coworkers expect a sequel. I'm living in fear. My dignity is in shambles. But I guess the good news is I'm now part of company legend. And yes, I always wear pants outside now. This happened 2 weeks ago and I'm still living in the fallout, emotionally and geographically. I'm typing this from my cousin's guest bedroom, where I've been crashing ever since I became the guy who got roasted by a parrot and lost everything. Buckle up. So, I work as a mid-level software engineer at a small startup. My boss, let's call him Greg, is a stereotypical eccentric tech dude. Super smart, socially oblivious, wears Crocs with socks every day. But overall, he's decent. The kind of guy who puts oat milk in the company fridge and insists on using whiteboards to think freely. Greg also has a parrot. A giant blue and yellow macaw named Caesar, who he treats like his child. This bird has a vocabulary that would make a sailor blush. He's infamous around the office, usually kept in a big ornate cage in Greg's office where he squawks things like "buy low, sell high," or "code monkeys unite." A few weeks ago, Greg asked if someone could bird-sit Caesar while he went on a week-long silent meditation retreat in Arizona. Everyone looked away or fake laughed, but because I'm a spineless people-pleaser who wants that sweet promotion, I said I'd do it. Greg was thrilled. Gave me a detailed packet with Caesar's schedule, diet, and mental stimulation needs. Weird, but fine. Now, my wife, well, ex-wife, wasn't thrilled. She's always been a little neurotic about cleanliness and noise. She's a lawyer, works long hours, and hates surprises. Caesar was all of those things in one. The first 2 days went okay. Caesar mimicked the microwave beep, imitated my ringtone, and occasionally yelled "Fire the interns," but nothing unbearable. Then, things started to shift. One morning, my wife walked into the kitchen in her robe, and Caesar squawked, "Nice ass, Jenna." My wife froze. I laughed awkwardly. "He must have heard that from Greg," I said. She narrowed her eyes. "My name's not Jenna." Now here's the thing, I dated a Jenna. Briefly. 3 years ago. My wife knows about her and has always had a weird hang-up about her because, admittedly, I was a little vague about how that ended. But nothing ever overlapped, no cheating, just some sketchy emotional overlap. Still, I hadn't heard the name Jenna aloud in years. I dismissed it. It's a common name. Caesar probably picked it up from a TV show. She didn't look convinced. Over the next few days, Caesar went nuclear. Every time my wife walked by, he'd chirp out increasingly specific and horrifying phrases. "Do that thing with your tongue, Jenna." "Don't tell Melissa." Hotel room. Saturday. Red panties. I swear on everything I love, I did not teach him any of this. I was being gaslit by a feathered demon. My wife was losing it. She stopped speaking to me. She started sleeping in the guest room. I even caught her recording Caesar on her phone. At one point she tried to cross-examine a bird. She was yelling things like, "When did he say that? Who is Jenna? Do you even know what panties are?" Caesar responded by whistling the Law and Order theme. I tried calling Greg. No answer. Dude was off the grid, presumably meditating in the desert or communing with cacti. I was stuck with a parrot who was systematically dismantling my life. Then came the dinner party. We had invited 2 of my wife's work colleagues over for a small get-together. The vibe was already tense. I was trying to act normal, serving wine, making awkward small talk. Caesar was quiet, suspiciously so. Halfway through dinner, in a moment of perfect silence between bites, Caesar screamed, "Oh God, Jenna, yes. Say my name like you did at the Marriott." The room went dead. Forks froze mid-air. My wife stood up, slowly, like she was about to deliver a closing argument. She looked at me. "You have until tomorrow to pack your things." I tried to protest. Tried to explain. Even Googled, "Can parrots fabricate false narratives?" It didn't matter. The damage was done. Her coworkers were already whispering. Caesar let out a tiny evil giggle, I swear to God. I'd never hated anything more in my life. She left the next morning to stay with her sister. I texted Greg, finally got a response, a thumbs up emoji, and hope Caesar wasn't too much trouble. Too much trouble? I almost Venmo requested him for a divorce lawyer. I returned Caesar immediately, told Greg that the bird might need an exorcism. Greg just laughed and said, "Oh yeah, he tends to mimic whatever he hears most often." My ex used to call me during hookups and yell at me. Guess Caesar was listening. So, Caesar wasn't quoting me. He was quoting Greg. To be clear, I was ruined by a parrot who was echoing my boss's toxic sex life. And my wife thought it was all about me. I tried explaining this to her. Sent her screenshots. Even suggested she talk to Greg herself. She said, and I quote, "I'm not taking relationship advice from a man who was cock-blocked by a bird." I haven't seen her since. So now I'm living with my cousin, job on the rocks, marriage in shambles, and every time I hear a ringtone or a microwave beep I flinch like a war vet. I may never recover. Moral of the story? Never trust a parrot. Especially not one named Caesar. TIFU. By taking my boss's toddler to the emergency vet. This happened last weekend and I'm just now recovering from the sheer volume of chaos it unleashed. So, I, 29F, work as an executive assistant for the VP of a big tech company. Let's call him Tom. Tom is actually a pretty chill boss, mid-40s, divorced, and has a 2-year-old daughter named Sophie who he adores more than life itself. I've met her a few times when he had to bring her into the office for emergencies. She's cute, surprisingly quiet, and obsessed with anything fuzzy. Stuffed animals, fluffy socks, actual animals, you name it. On Friday, Tom had a flight to San Francisco for a weekend conference. He mentioned that his regular babysitter canceled and he was panicking. Like an idiot, Reed, sucker, I said, "Hey, I'm free Saturday if you need help for a few hours." I didn't really expect him to take me up on it. He absolutely did. So Saturday morning, 9 a.m. sharp, I'm at his place. He gives me the quick toddler care breakdown, food in the fridge, toys in the living room, nap at 1 p.m., etc., thanks me a million times, and leaves. All good. Sophie is being a little angel. We color, we watch a movie, she feeds me plastic broccoli and giggles every time I pretend to choke on it. Cute stuff. Around 11 a.m., she runs to the window, squeals doggy, and bolts toward the back door. Tom did mention he had a golden retriever named Marley, old and lazy. Sure enough, Marley is chilling on the patio, looking like he hasn't moved in a decade. Sophie insists we go outside. Fine, it's a nice day. We head out, she toddles around the grass, and then it happens. She starts giggling uncontrollably and holding something. I think it's a toy at first, but then I realize it's furry. And small. And not a toy. It's a squirrel. A very real, very injured squirrel. It looks like it might have been nicked by a car or something. One leg is twisted weird, and it's clearly dazed. Before I can even react, she runs toward the back door, holding this poor half-dead animal like it's a beanie baby, yelling "Doggy baby! Doggy baby!" I have to chase her down like a linebacker and gently, so gently, get her to put it in a shoebox with a towel. She's completely convinced this is Marley's puppy, and she's already named it Fluff. I text Tom. No response, he's probably in a meeting. I try calling. Nothing. Now here's where I make the mistake. Instead of waiting for him to respond or just, doing nothing, I think, okay, I'll take this squirrel to the vet and they'll know what to do. But of course, it's Saturday. No normal vet is open. The only one that answers is an emergency animal hospital about 25 minutes away. I explain the situation, they say they'll take a look, but since it's wildlife, they may have to hand it over to a rehab center. Fine. Great. Let's go. I put Sophie in her car seat, put the shoebox on the passenger seat, and start driving. 5 minutes in, I glance over and the shoebox is empty. Fluff is gone. Cue full-blown panic. I pull over into a Starbucks parking lot, throw the car in park, and start looking. Sophie is screaming now, "Fluff! Fluffy doggy!" I find the squirrel under my seat, very much alive and very much not happy to be there. I manage to gently scoop it back into the box using a plastic bag and a to-go coffee cup lid like a shovel. I'm sweating. Sophie is crying. Fluff is twitching. We finally make it to the emergency vet. The receptionist is this stone-faced, no-nonsense woman who looks like she's seen some things. I walk in, shoebox in hand, toddler on hip, hair a mess, and say, "Hi, this is a squirrel. My boss's toddler found it and thinks it's a dog baby. Please help." She blinks once and says, "We'll take it to the back." The vet tech comes out, takes the box, and assures me they'll try their best. I ask if I need to sign anything, they say no, since it's a wild animal. Relieved, I go back to the car and see that Sophie has somehow unbuckled her seat, and is trying to climb into the front. I wrangle her back in, get home, and give her an emergency popsicle as a peace offering. She falls asleep shortly after, cuddling a stuffed sloth. I text Tom again. Still nothing. Now here's where it all goes off the rails. Around 6 p.m., Tom calls me. He sounds panicked. "Hey, everything okay?" I ask. No. "Where's Marley?" My blood runs cold. I say, very slowly, "In the backyard, I think." He says, "I just got a voicemail from the vet saying thanks for bringing in Marley, and they're prepping for surgery." What? My brain blanks for a second. Then it hits me. When I checked in at the vet, I said my boss's toddler found it and dog baby and gave them my name and number. They must have assumed I meant Marley, the actual dog. Someone at the vet saw the squirrel, thought it was Marley, and left Tom a message thanking him for bringing in his golden retriever for emergency surgery. I freak out, explain everything as fast as I can. There's silence. Then Tom just says, "You took a squirrel to the emergency vet, and they think it's my dog." Yes. That is what happened. He starts laughing. Like, hysterically. I think he might have actually dropped his phone. He says, "Please, for the love of God, go get Marley and send me a photo so I don't die of a heart attack." I run out to the backyard. Marley is there, very much alive, very much old, and very much confused by everything. I send a picture. Tom calls back still laughing and tells me to sit down because it gets better. The vet called him again after realizing their mistake. Apparently, when the tech opened the box and saw it was a squirrel, there was genuine confusion. But because I never clarified anything besides dog baby and injured, someone assumed it was a very small breed. I am not making this up. So they did basic vitals, realized it wasn't a dog, then checked the security cam footage and saw me carrying in a shoebox and a toddler. The receptionist apparently said, "Oh God. We just thanked a guy for bringing in his daughter's emotional support Yorkie and it was a squirrel." In the end, they transferred the squirrel to a wildlife rehab. Marley got a puppuccino the next day. Sophie still asks about Fluff. Tom has now nicknamed me Squirrel Girl at work and told the entire executive team, who think it's the funniest thing ever. Moral of the story: never offer to babysit unless you're ready to commit to wild animal rescue, medical miscommunication, and possibly the most confusing veterinary record of all time. Hey, friends! If you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what can be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. TIFU by accidentally joining a cult and becoming their treasurer. This happened about 8 months ago, but the full consequences didn't hit until much later, and now it's too good, or terrible, not to share. I, 27 had just moved to a new city for a job. I didn't know anyone, and I was in that vulnerable, maybe I'll take up yoga and journaling phase of starting over. My social life had withered during the pandemic, and I was desperate to make friends or, at the very least, have someone besides the guy at the bodega say good morning to me. So one Sunday afternoon, I saw a flyer at a coffee shop titled Awaken Your Inner Light, Weekly Connection Group. It had one of those minimalist designs with a lot of white space and a tree logo that made it seem like a wellness seminar or mindfulness class. I figured, hey, why not? The first meeting was free, and it said all are welcome. I showed up at the address on the flyer, which turned out to be a decently sized house in a quiet residential neighborhood. A friendly woman named Lila greeted me at the door with a warm smile and herbal tea that tasted like liquid anxiety. Inside, there were about 15 people seated in a circle on floor cushions, chatting quietly while some soft flute music played from a speaker in the corner. We did some breathing exercises, then a guy named Cyrus's bearded, flowing robes, looked like if Jared Leto ran a tea shop, started talking about harmonizing our vibrational frequencies and transcending the egoic prison of the flesh. A bit weirder than I expected, but honestly, I'd been on enough dates with people who talk like that. I just nodded along, thinking it was all spiritual metaphor. The second meeting was stranger. They gave us new names, soul names, based on what they said was our aura color. Mine was apparently teal, so I got dubbed Zaylor. I almost laughed, but everyone else seemed so sincere, I didn't want to be rude. Plus, the group was weirdly supportive. People hugged each other freely, shared stories about their lives, and complimented each other constantly. It felt like emotional crack after 2 years of social isolation. By week 4, I was Zaylor full-time in the group, and I was invited to something called an initiation gathering out in the woods. I should have backed out. I really should have. The gathering took place in a forest clearing about an hour outside the city. Everyone wore white and brought offerings, candles, herbs, jars of honey. We built a fire, chanted a lot, and passed around some kind of homemade fermented drink that tasted like kombucha's evil twin. I got super dizzy and had some wild visions involving a deer that turned into my high school English teacher. Everyone clapped like it was a good sign. Cyrus, who apparently goes by Father Celestium now, said I had the potential to be a third eye opener, which I assumed was like being a junior manager or something. Then things escalated. They asked me if I wanted to serve the light further by taking on the role of financial harmonizer. I was flattered. I figured it was just some spreadsheet work, maybe helping organize donations or tracking spending for tea and incense. I have a finance degree, so I said sure. What they actually meant was, I was now in charge of all group funds, which included keeping logs, making bank deposits, and transporting large amounts of cash that people were donating for the Great Shift. We're talking thousands of dollars. They didn't use Venmo or PayPal, everything was paper envelopes and drop points. I started getting paranoid, wondering where the money was really going. Then one day, I opened a locked file cabinet in the Temple house while looking for a receipt binder. What I found instead were documents showing purchases of land in rural Arizona under the group's name, registered to a non-profit called the Celestium Ascension Path. There were also plans, like literal blueprints, for a massive dome-shaped compound. The kicker? There were letters of intent signed by several members, including mine, agreeing to transfer all worldly assets upon the fulfillment of vibrational readiness. I had no memory of signing that. But there it was. Zayler. In Sharpie. At that point, my fight or flight kicked in. I quietly started phasing out. I stopped showing up to meetings, ignored texts from Lila and Father Celestium, and blocked all numbers associated with the group. It worked for a while, until 2 months ago, when I got a certified letter in the mail from the Celestium Ascension Path requesting a financial handover and honoring the Path of Light's fiduciary duties. Apparently, I had never formally resigned. So in their eyes, I was still the financial harmonizer. And they were now accusing me of withholding sacred funds. I went into panic mode. I lawyered up. Here's where it gets worse. In the time I was ghosting them, the group had filed for religious organization status, which granted them tax exemptions and certain legal protections. My lawyer said it was murky legal territory. If I couldn't prove misuse of funds or coercion, I could technically be liable for some of the taxes and misreported income because I'd signed off on the financial forms, even if I didn't fully understand what I was doing. So now I'm in a legal hell trying to untangle myself from this cult's bank records. I'm working with an accountant, a lawyer, and a cult deprogrammer. Yes, that's a real job. I had to explain to my very normal, very corporate parents why I received a subpoena from something called the Celestial Court of Inner Illumination. To top it all off, last week I ran into Lila at a farmer's market. She was wearing a lavender robe and trying to sell vegan jerky. She looked at me with genuine disappointment and said, "You were almost ready to ascend, Zayler." We all felt it. I bought a bag of her jerky out of guilt. It tastes like sadness and cumin. Anyway. That's how I accidentally joined a cult and now have to spend the next year auditing spiritual bank records to prove I didn't embezzle enlightenment money. If anyone ever invites you to an initiation gathering in the woods, say no. Just say no. I don't even know how to start this without sounding like I committed some kind of felony. But here we go. So last weekend, my boss, who I normally only interact with via email and the occasional stiff Zoom call, asks me a favor. He says he and his wife are going out of town and their usual pet sitter fell through. They need someone to watch their golden retriever, Tucker. I've mentioned in passing I like dogs, so I guess I was an easy target. He assures me it'll be super easy and that Tucker is a total sweetheart. All I have to do is stay at their place, feed him twice a day, take him on a walk in the evening, and chill. He even says I can help myself to the fridge, use the home theater, and enjoy the hot tub if I want. Now, I should have known something was off when he handed me a laminated, color-coded manual titled Tucker's World. I'm not kidding. It was a 12-page binder, with a table of contents and footnotes. But hey, I figured rich people just like to be thorough. Plus, I really wanted to impress my boss, and their house is this gorgeous, secluded modern mansion in the hills. So I said yes. I get there Friday evening. Place is insane. Floor-to-ceiling windows, minimalist furniture, one of those fridges that talks to you. Tucker, the dog, bounds out to greet me, tail wagging. Seems normal enough. I settle in, feed him, precisely 1.75 cups of organic kibble mixed with bone broth warmed to 92 degrees Fahrenheit, because of course, and decide to watch a movie in the home theater. Here's where it begins to unravel. I'm halfway through the Matrix when I hear this weird sound from the hallway. A sort of deep, guttural growl. I pause the movie, thinking maybe Tucker's playing with a toy or something. But no, he's standing completely still in the dark hallway, facing a closed door, growling like he's auditioning for a horror movie. I laugh nervously and call out, "Hey, buddy, what's up?" He doesn't move. just stares at the door and growls. Now, I'm not great with horror stuff. I grew up scared of Are You Afraid of the Dark? But I figure it's probably just the wind or a raccoon outside. I go over, open the door, and nearly jump out of my skin. It's a room. Pitch black. Freezing cold. And completely covered, floor to ceiling, in framed photos of Tucker. I'm talking hundreds. All identical sizes. Some show him dressed in tiny costumes. Others are just close-ups of his face. There's one particularly haunting one of him wearing a crown, sitting on a throne. I back out of the room slowly and close the door. I tell Tucker, let's just pretend we didn't see that, and return to the theater. That night, I try to sleep, but Tucker insists on sleeping in the bed with me. Which would be fine, except he doesn't sleep, he stares. I wake up at 2 a.m. and he's just perched at the edge of the bed, wide-eyed, breathing softly, like a sentinel. I finally fall asleep again and wake up to the sound of chewing. Tucker has torn into my backpack and completely destroyed my protein bars, headphones, and, worst of all, my work laptop. Just obliterated it. I'm talking bite marks through the screen. Panicking, I go to grab my phone to call my boss, only to realize I left it charging in the kitchen. I run downstairs, and immediately slip in something wet. I crash to the floor, look up, and see the entire kitchen covered in peanut butter. Jars opened. Lids flung. Smears on the cabinets, fridge, and ceiling. I look over and Tucker is just standing in the middle of the chaos, tail wagging, peanut butter caked to his face like war paint. I should have called then. I should have ended it. But for some reason, maybe guilt, maybe stupidity, I decide to clean it all up. I spend 3 hours scrubbing, mopping, crying softly into a Swiffer. Later that day, I try to walk him and he bolts. Just sprints into the neighborhood like he's been freed from a prison camp. I chase this dog for nearly 2 miles, wearing Crocs, screaming his name like a lunatic. Neighbors peek out of their windows. One old lady gives me the finger for some reason. I finally corner him in someone's backyard, only to have him leap into their koi pond and refuse to come out. Took me 20 minutes of pleading and an entire rotisserie chicken from their outdoor grill to lure him back. When we return, drenched and exhausted, I discover Tucker has some form of bowel revenge waiting for me on the white shag rug in the living room. And not a normal one. This was otherworldly. I didn't know something so foul could come out of something so fluffy. The next 24 hours are a blur of emotional breakdowns, failed attempts to give Tucker a bath, he bit me, gently but firmly, like a warning, and Googling can a dog be possessed. Sunday morning arrives, and I'm counting the minutes until my boss returns. I'm curled up on the couch, bags under my eyes, hands scratched, emotionally broken. Tucker, on the other hand, is sitting calmly beside me, gazing at me like a Zen master who just finished a successful exorcism. My boss and his wife come in, bright and cheery. Was he good? His wife asks. There's a pause. A long one. Yeah, I say, with a smile I don't recognize on my own face. He was perfect. They thank me, hand me a bottle of wine and a $50 Amazon gift card, and I drive home in silence, windows down, questioning every life decision I've ever made. On Monday morning, my boss sends a short email, thanks again. Tucker really took a liking to you. If you're up for it, we'd love to have you sit him again next month. I don't respond. TIFU a few weeks ago, but the fallout is still happening. I, the 32M, grew up hearing about this old family heirloom that my grandmother insisted was a rare imperial artifact from China. According to her, it was passed down from her great-grandfather, who apparently was a merchant with exotic tastes. It's this jade sculpture, sort of a lion or dragon-looking creature, about the size of a football, sitting on a carved wooden pedestal. I always thought it was cool, and when Grandma passed last year, she left it to me. My parents didn't really care about it. They always said Grandma liked to embellish stories, and they assumed it was just a decorative piece she picked up at a flea market. But Grandma was adamant in her will. She wanted it preserved, displayed, and respected for its history. Fast forward to a month ago. Antiques Roadshow was coming to my city. I applied to be on the show as a kind of tribute to Grandma. Maybe she'd been right and this thing was actually worth something. The producers loved the backstory I submitted and invited me to bring it on the show for filming. So I show up with this sculpture wrapped like it's the Ark of the Covenant. The appraiser is this British dude, very polite and dry-humored. I unwrap the sculpture in front of the cameras, tell the story Grandma always told us, and he's nodding, saying things like, very interesting. Quite an unusual piece. I'm feeling good. Then he starts inspecting it with a magnifying glass, tapping it with a tool, even smelling it. His brow furrows. The camera crew gets quieter. After about 5 minutes, he clears his throat and asks if I'm okay hearing the appraisal on camera. I say sure. He sighs. This is not jade, he says, very delicately. It's molded resin. A kind of plastic. And the base appears to be standard machine-cut plywood. Probably mass-produced. My heart drops, but I try to laugh it off. I say, oh, well. That's a bit embarrassing, or something like that. He nods sympathetically and continues. Here's the twist, this specific model was popular in the 1970s. You can actually find a nearly identical piece in old Sears catalogs. At this point, I'm spiraling. The Imperial Chinese artifact is a mass-market home decor item from a 1978 Sears catalog. And not even a good one. Mine had a crack near the tail that had clearly been glued. But the real gut punch was when he turned the base over and found a faded sticker that said, Made in Taiwan, $12.99. I'm sweating. This is all being filmed. The appraiser is trying to be nice, but the crew can't hide their amusement. I'm the only one not laughing. After the show, one of the producers comes over and tells me my segment is a great story, and they want to air it. I say okay because at that point, I'm too numb to care. I go home and try to laugh about it. I tell my girlfriend, and she does laugh, hard. I tell my dad, who chuckles and says, told you your grandma was full of it. Then I make the mistake of telling my aunt. My aunt was the only one who fully bought into Grandma's stories. She's always been into genealogy, family history, all that. She flips. She says I humiliated the family on national TV, disrespected Grandma's memory, and probably faked the whole thing for attention. I try to explain that I was just honoring Grandma's wishes, but she blocks me. Like, on everything. My cousins won't talk to me either. Then, a week before the episode airs, I get a call from a number I don't recognize. It's a lawyer. Apparently, the sculpture is listed in Grandma's will not just as an heirloom, but as a protected item. There's some clause about it never being sold, gifted, or degraded. I have no idea what that even means. The lawyer says the will used very old-fashioned language but technically leaves room for a challenge if any family member thinks I've violated the artifact's sanctity. Now I'm thinking I'm about to be sued over a fake jade lion from Sears. The episode airs, and of course they edit it to be extra dramatic. My segment becomes the viral when you think you're a millionaire but you're actually a moron clip. Memes are made. Someone overlays the reveal with sad violin music. People recognize me at work. My boss jokes about it at a team meeting. My LinkedIn profile got edited anonymously to include aspiring imperial antiquities dealer. My inbox? Full of emails offering to buy the famous $12.99 lion. But here's where it gets weirder. A week after the episode aired, I get a letter. Like, actual snail mail. No return address. Inside is a photo, black and white, clearly very old, of my grandmother as a young woman, standing next to what looks like the same sculpture. Except in the photo, it's much more elaborate. The base is ornate, the carving is sharper, and there's a plaque in front of it with Chinese characters. Under the photo is a handwritten note, she wasn't wrong. You just had the wrong one. That's it. No signature. Nothing. I take the photo to my dad, who goes pale. He says, I haven't seen that in 50 years. Apparently, there was an old sculpture. His grandfather had it, and it was supposedly valuable. But it vanished during a house fire in 1972. According to him, Grandma was never the same after that. She had an identical one made in the 70s and told everyone it was the original. But no one could prove otherwise, so the story stuck. So now I'm left with a fake artifact, half my family thinking I'm a traitor, internet infamy, a mystery letter hinting at a real treasure, and the possibility that somewhere out there, the actual heirloom still exists. I tried calling the show to see if they could trace the letter or the person who submitted the photo, but they couldn't, or wouldn't, help. I've been checking antique listings and contacting museums, but so far, nothing. But I did keep the $12.99 lion. It sits on my bookshelf next to the photo now, mocking me and Grandma's sense of humor from beyond the grave. Frogtastic_vibes. It's got maybe 300 followers, mostly other people who collect weird stuff. It's harmless. It's fun. And it's deeply private. So Monday morning, Kara emails me asking for a few drafts of our new product campaign and says, send me whatever visuals you've got so far. Doesn't need to be polished. Just want to see your direction. Cool. Easy. I open up Photoshop, grab some rough concept boards, drag and drop the files into an email. I'm even feeling productive. Efficient. Focused. No coffee needed. Just like Kara. Then my cat jumps on the desk. Her name is Cantaloupe. She's orange, fat, and has no sense of boundaries. In the process of knocking over a cup of pens, she slams her body into my keyboard, and I watch in horror as my inbox flickers and the email to Kara sends itself. No big deal, right? Except I realize I hadn't actually attached the campaign files yet. In that split second of chaos, something else got dragged in. I go to send to double-check. Maybe it wasn't too bad. Wrong. I had sent Kara 43 high-res pictures of my ceramic frog collection. No context. No subject line. Just to Kara L, VP Strategy Attachments, frog1.jpg, frog2.jpg, frog3.jpg, all the way to frog43.jpg now. These aren't subtle frog photos. These are glamour shots. Studio lights. Backdrops. One frog's wearing sunglasses and sitting on a tiny beach chair. One is photoshopped into the Oval Office. One is wearing a chef's hat in a fake kitchen. I went through a phase, okay? I panic. First instinct is to call IT. Tell them to retract the email. But it's already been delivered. And Karis the VP. I'm not even sure what her sense of humor is. I've never seen her laugh. Ever. What if she thinks I'm mocking her professionalism? What if she thinks I'm into weird frog erotica? What if I get fired for having a deeply unhinged amphibian fetish? I draft a follow-up email 5 different times. They all sound insane. Eventually, I settle on, Hi Kara, apologies for the earlier email. My cat accidentally sent a batch of personal photos instead of the campaign visuals. The correct files are attached here. Best, D. Send. Clean. Professional. Humiliating. I don't hear back for 4 hours. Around 3 p.m., I get an email. Subject, your frogs. I die for the second time that day. She writes, Hi D, thank you for the updated files, love the direction. Also, your frog collection is astonishing. Truly. My favorite is the one in the cowboy outfit. Kind regards, Kara. That's it. No smiley face. No LOL. Just astonishing. I sit there for a full minute, questioning my life. Do I lean into this? Do I pretend it never happened? Am I about to become frog guy at work? Then it gets worse. The next day, I join the weekly creative team Zoom call. It's a big one, like 30 people. Kara's leading it. We go around with quick updates. It's all normal until, completely unprompted, Kara says, also, just a shout out to Dee for sending me the most unexpectedly delightful photo collection I've seen in years. You're very talented. There's a beat of silence. Someone goes, what kind of photos? And Kara, deadpan, says, frogs. The chat explodes. People are begging to see them. Our social media manager is demanding I turn it into a content series. One of the interns says leak the frogs. Kara just sits back, completely calm, sipping water like she didn't just detonate my life. By the end of the call, our department head had made a Slack channel called #FrogFanClub. They added me automatically. I now wake up to frog memes, frog emojis, frog puns. People have started mailing me links to rare frog figurines on Etsy. Someone photoshopped one of my frogs into our Q3 sales deck for luck. The most recent request? A company calendar. With frogs. Oh, and HR emailed me a friendly reminder that all internal communications should stay appropriate and work-related, which I'm 99% sure was just protocol but still made me feel like I'm on some frog-related watch list. So now, I'm both extremely relieved and chronically mortified. I accidentally built a reputation I can never escape. Kara keeps giving me knowing looks. Every time she says leap forward in strategy, someone inevitably snickers. I haven't corrected a single person who thinks the frogs were intentional. I just gave up. The ceramic frog in the cowboy outfit? He's now my desktop wallpaper. He's become my brand. All because my cat wanted to nap on my keyboard. TIFU by convincing my girlfriend I could speak fluent Swedish, so this happened over the past few months, and everything came crashing down just a few days ago. I'm still reeling, so I figured why not share my shame with the internet. For context, I, 27M, met my girlfriend, 26F, about a year ago at a mutual friend's party. She's Swedish-American, born in Stockholm but raised mostly in the States. She's fluent in Swedish and speaks it with her family and some close friends, but usually sticks to English otherwise. At that same party, I overheard her casually mention how hard it is to find people who get her background or speak her language. Something about her saying that struck a chord. She was drop-dead gorgeous, smart, and funny, and I, being a dumbass with a crush, decided the best way to impress her was by pretending I could speak Swedish too. Why? I don't know. I'd done Duolingo for like 3 weeks a year prior, and apparently that was enough for me to feel confident dropping Jaghead or Max into a conversation and acting like I was just rusty. She got excited, asked a few simple questions in Swedish, and I managed to bluff through with phrases I barely understood. She seemed charmed. I figured I'd just take a crash course on the side and catch up before she caught on. She gave me her number, and that was the beginning of my long and stupid lie. The first few weeks were okay. We mostly texted and hung out in English. I downloaded every Swedish language app one could find. I even started watching Swedish YouTubers and shows with subtitles. But the progress was slow, and the relationship moved fast. Soon we were seeing each other 3-4 times a week. She was always dropping Swedish phrases here and there, endearments, little jokes, even talking to herself while cooking, and I just smiled and nodded like a golden retriever. I learned to recognize certain tones and patterns, so I could bluff context. If she laughed, I laughed. If she sounded annoyed, I said forlit and hoped it fit. At one point, she said something like, "You have a bit of an accent, it's cute." I played it off like, haha yeah, I learned from my dad's old tapes, which made zero sense but somehow didn't raise a red flag. It all came to a head 2 weeks ago. Her parents were in town from Stockholm and she wanted me to meet them over dinner at her place. I panicked but couldn't say no. I figured maybe they'd be polite and we'd stick to English. Nope. The minute I walked in, her dad lit up like a Christmas tree and launched into rapid-fire Swedish. I froze. Then I smiled and responded with the only thing that came to mind, ja, det är bra. He blinked. My girlfriend gave me a weird look, but I guess they assumed I was just shy. Her mom tried next. I responded with jag gillar fisk. I like fish, because she was holding a tray of salmon. I was sweating bullets. The conversation limped along like a dying animal. At one point I said jag är en potatis, I am a potato, because I remembered it from a meme. Her parents exchanged a glance. My girlfriend looked like she was trying to process a stroke. They switched to English after that, and the night was awkward but survivable. I thought maybe I'd made it through. I even gave myself a little pat on the back when I got home. Crisis averted, right? Wrong. 3 days ago, my girlfriend showed up at my apartment, absolutely livid. Apparently her dad had texted her a few jokes in Swedish and told her to show Max. One was a pun involving cows or something. She read it aloud to me and waited. I panicked and said haha, ja, kol, which apparently didn't fit at all. She stared at me for a long second and asked, very quietly, do you actually speak Swedish? And my dumbass, caught in this lie for nearly a year, still tried to worm my way out. Kinda, I said. I've just been out of practice. She didn't buy it. She pulled out her phone, opened the Google Translate app, and started quizzing me. Words, sentences, even basic grammar. I failed every single one. I didn't even get the word for book right. She looked more and more horrified with every answer. I finally broke. I admitted everything. That I only knew a few words, that I'd lied to impress her, that I thought I could learn fast enough to keep the illusion going, and then it snowballed out of control. She sat there in silence for a long time. Then she laughed. Not a nice laugh. The kind of laugh that sounds like you just realized your dog is actually a raccoon in disguise. She said, and I'll never forget this, do you know how many times I told you I loved you in Swedish and you just nodded? Turns out she'd poured her heart out to me in a language I pretended to know, and I'd responded with gibberish and smiles. I tried to apologize. I told her I really did love her, and I'd meant it all along, even if I didn't understand every word. She wasn't having it. She said she needed time to think. She left, and I haven't heard from her since. I sent one message, no response. It's been 3 days and my apartment feels like a grave. I'm now stuck in this weird limbo where the only phrases I fully know in Swedish are ways to embarrass myself. I can order a cinnamon bun, say I'm a potato, and declare that my cat is fat. But nothing useful, nothing romantic. Nothing honest. I keep replaying all the moments where I could have come clean early on. Where I could have said, hey, I really like you and I'm trying to learn, but I'm not there yet. She might have laughed. Maybe we could have studied together. Maybe I wouldn't have turned myself into a walking cautionary tale. So yeah. TIFU by turning I can speak Swedish into the dumbest, longest running improv show of my life, and possibly blowing up the best relationship I've ever had. If you ever feel tempted to lie about knowing a language to impress someone, just don't. Learn how to say I'm learning instead. Jag är en idiot. So this happened last month and I'm just now crawling out from under the flaming wreckage of my life, reputation, and social media accounts. Buckle up. It's a long one. I work in a fairly mundane office job, Excel, meetings, budget stuff, whatever. To cope with the crushing monotony, I started a private Twitter account where I mostly post jokes, memes, and occasional rants. Just me and maybe 40 followers, mostly friends from college who appreciate my sarcasm. One day I'm sitting in the break room at lunch, half scrolling Twitter and half listening to my coworker Tyler drone on about his fantasy football team, when I see this video blowing up. It's a clip of a guy in a full business suit sprinting down the street, holding a briefcase, and launching himself into a closing subway train. The doors slam shut just as he gets in, and everyone on the platform cheers. It's hilarious, cinematic, and just the kind of chaotic energy the internet loves. Someone captioned it with, "When you can't afford to be late one more time," and it was already at 40K retweets. On a whim, I quote tweeted it with, "Not only was I not late, I made it to the pitch meeting 5 minutes early and landed the client." Never doubt the power of cardio. A joke. Clearly. Obviously, I wasn't the guy in the video. I don't even live in that city. I've never run for a train in my life unless you count that one time I tripped at the airport and face-planted into a moving walkway. But for whatever reason, maybe because I'd recently updated my profile pic to a somewhat blurry Sudantai photo from a wedding, people believed me. It started slow. A few retweets. Some hell yeah replies. Then someone with 500K followers called me the corporate flash, and it snowballed. Overnight I went from 40 followers to 12K. Journalists started DMing me for interviews. A morning show producer emailed me asking if I'd be willing to appear remotely and recount my harrowing commute. Here's where I should have backed down. Clarified it was a joke. But I didn't. Because I'm a moron. And also because I'd already gotten a congratulatory Slack from my manager who saw the tweet, and I panicked. So I doubled down. I wrote a whole tweet thread about the day that changed everything. I invented a fake client. Described the pitch. Said I got a raise. People ate it up. By the end of the week, I had over 70K followers and someone had made a fan edit of me with that Hans Zimmer Interstellar soundtrack in the background. I wasn't just a guy who ran for a train, I was a hustler. A modern hero. A symbol of late capitalist determination. But of course, the internet giveth and the internet taketh away. The first crack came when a Redditor with way too much time on their hands did a frame-by-frame analysis of the original video and noticed the runner had a distinctive wrist tattoo. I do not have any tattoos, which people quickly figured out from my vacation pics. Then someone else found the original uploader, who came forward and said the guy in the video was their coworker, a guy named Deshaun from Queens. Deshaun went viral again, this time for not getting credit. Meanwhile, I was labeled a fraud. A grifter. A clout leech, which is honestly kind of a cool insult. I might put it in my Twitter bio if I ever recover. I tried to apologize. I said it was a joke that got out of hand. Some people understood, but by then it was too late. BuzzFeed wrote an article titled "The Fake Train Guy and the Age of Online Lies." My DMs were a disaster. I lost about 30K followers in 48 hours. But the worst part, was when my boss called me into his office. Turns out he'd been using my viral moment as a morale booster. He put my tweet on a slide in a leadership presentation. He'd even submitted me for some kind of internal company recognition award. So now, he was furious, not because I lied to the internet, but because I embarrassed him. He didn't fire me, but he reassigned me to a different department. I'm now working in procurement, which, for the blessedly uninitiated, is corporate purgatory. I spend most of my time reviewing vendor contracts and filling out spreadsheets that make my soul whimper. And yes, I deleted the tweet. But screenshots are forever. The memes are out there. There's even a t-shirt floating around with my face photoshopped onto Usain Bolt. A coworker wore it to our Zoom happy hour last week. So now I live with the eternal shame of being fake train guy, a cautionary tale about clout chasing and the dangers of trying to be funny on the internet. Every now and then I get tagged in threads like "What's the dumbest thing someone lied about online?" and I just quietly log off for the day. Moral of the story: don't pretend to be someone you're not, especially when that someone is a viral legend with a very visible wrist tattoo. And if you're gonna lie on Twitter, at least be funny enough to survive the backlash. TIFU by crashing my boss's daughter's wedding and accidentally becoming the groom. This happened 2 weekends ago and I'm just now emotionally ready to talk about it. For context, I work at a mid-sized law firm and had recently been trying to get on my boss's good side. My boss, whom I'll call Mr. Livingston, is the kind of guy who shakes your hand and checks your watch at the same time. Super traditional, super rich, and makes it very clear he doesn't have time for nonsense. I, being a junior associate, am made entirely of nonsense and live in perpetual fear of being fired. So when I found out his daughter was getting married at this massive estate outside of town and the whole firm was invited, I knew this was my chance. I marked it in my calendar with 10 reminders. I dry cleaned my best suit. I spent 3 days trying to grow a mustache for gravitas. Spoiler, it didn't happen. But I was ready. Except I wasn't. The day of the wedding, I got horrifically sick from what I assume was a gas station egg salad sandwich. I'll spare you the worst of it, but let's just say I became well acquainted with the porcelain gods. I texted the HR rep saying I'd have to miss it, but somewhere between sweat-drenched naps and a cocktail of expired Pepto-Bismol and tea, I rallied. I decided I would be there even if I had to drag my corpse across the lawn. So I showed up. 2 hours late. The wedding was being held at this sprawling countryside venue with multiple large pavilions and white tents and florals everywhere. I was surprised the ceremony hadn't started yet, but I figured, hey, rich people run late. Now, here's where things start to spiral. I was walking up to the main area when I heard someone yell, "Oh, thank God, he's here." Before I could react, I was grabbed by a group of women who started adjusting my jacket, fussing with my hair, and dragging me toward a tent. I tried to speak. I really did. But in my half-dead state, I could only croak out, "Wait, we don't have time," one of the women, probably an aunt or someone, barked. "Get your ass down the aisle." I was pushed forward and suddenly music started playing. And people stood up. At this point I was delirious, dehydrated, and running on sheer panic. I thought maybe this was some quirky wedding tradition. Maybe they wanted all the guests to walk down the aisle as a symbol of togetherness or some Pinterest bullsh *T. So I walked. People clapped. I kept walking. The next thing I knew, I was standing at the altar, staring across at the most confused-looking woman I've ever seen. The bride. The actual bride. She whispered, "Who the hell are you?" I whispered back, "I don't know anymore." Turns out, the actual groom had gotten cold feet and bailed about an hour before I arrived. The families had kept it under wraps, hoping he'd change his mind. The mother of the bride saw me, a well-dressed man arriving late, and assumed I was the minister the wedding planner had hired last minute. Why a 28-year-old law associate with a dollar store haircut looked like someone qualified to wed two humans, I don't know. But it gets worse. As I stood there, the real officiant came sprinting down the aisle from one of the other tents yelling, "I'm here. I'm so sorry, my GPS." Chaos. Pure chaos. People shouting. The bride's dad screaming. A woman fainted. The DJ started playing soft jazz in some misguided attempt to calm the room. I tried to back away quietly, but someone had parked a champagne tower right behind the altar. I tripped backward, took the entire thing down like a Jenga tower of shame, and got drenched in bubbly and broken glass. Security was called. That's right. I got escorted out by security at my boss's daughter's wedding, looking like a rejected Bond villain who drowned in view of Clickwat. But it still gets worse. The next day, I got a call from HR. I was certain I was being fired. But the woman on the phone, bless her clueless heart, said, "Mr. Livingston said you made quite the impression yesterday." I was ready to apologize when she added, "He said you had the guts to show up when others didn't. He liked your confidence." I have never known such confusion. Since then, Mr. Livingston has been strangely warm to me. He invited me to lunch. He asked me to sit in on a big client meeting. It's like stepping into the Twilight Zone. I still don't know if he thinks I am the groom, or if he's just impressed I had the audacity to hijack his daughter's almost wedding. Either way, I'm riding the wave. Also, side note, the bride DM'd me on Instagram. She said, "That was the funniest thing that's ever happened to me. Thanks for making my disaster day into something memorable. We're getting coffee next week." TIFU by accidentally giving my neighbor's cat a Viking funeral. Let me just start by saying I'm not some kind of pyromaniac or pagan revivalist. I'm just a dude who grew up on a steady diet of History Channel documentaries and late-night Reddit rabbit holes. That context will be important. So this happened last weekend. I live in a quiet suburban neighborhood, the kind where everyone knows each other's names but nobody's in each other's business too much. I rent the bottom unit of a duplex. My upstairs neighbor, Helen, is a sweet 70-something widow who bakes cookies for the mailman and refers to her plants as her babies. She also had a cat named Mr. Tibbles. Yes, had. Mr. Tibbles was ancient, cranky, and had more fur than awareness of personal space. He used to sneak into my place through the back door like he paid rent, plop himself on my couch, and give me the stink eye for hours. But, against all odds, I grew weirdly fond of him. Last Friday night, I got home from work to find Helen sitting on the porch in her rocking chair, looking like she'd been crying. I asked if everything was okay and she told me, in a quivery voice, that Mr. Tibbles had passed away in his sleep that morning. Now, normal people might say, "I'm so sorry," and maybe bring over some lasagna later. I, in a moment of emotionally driven stupidity and over-the-top empathy, said, "Let me take care of him." She looked confused. "Take care of him?" "Yeah," I said, thinking on my feet. "I'll handle the arrangements." "Arrangements?" "I'll give him a proper send-off." Why did I say that? I don't know. Maybe I was thinking of a shoebox burial under the tree or something. Maybe I watched The Northman one too many times. But Helen looked so touched and relieved. She actually squeezed my hand and said, "You always were such a thoughtful young man." So now I had a dead cat in a cardboard box in my living room. It sat there overnight, and by Saturday morning, the weight of my idiotic words started sinking in. I couldn't just dump him in the trash. That's illegal, right? I couldn't bury him in Helen's yard without asking, and asking now would mean admitting I had no idea what I was doing. So, naturally, I decided to give him a Viking funeral. Here's the thing, my buddy Kyle owns a canoe. It's a crappy old thing, more patches than wood, but it floats. I called him up, told him I needed to borrow it for a project, and he didn't ask too many questions because Kyle has seen me pour 3 entire bottles of hot sauce into a chili competition just to prove a point. He delivered the canoe that afternoon. I live about a mile from a small lake, more like a big pond, called Sparrow Lake. Quiet, ringed by trees, rarely visited by anyone but dog walkers and maybe the occasional stoner. It was perfect. I spent the better part of the day building what can only be described as the most haphazard funeral pyre known to man. I lined the canoe with kindling, added a few logs, draped Mr. Tibbles in one of my old black t-shirts like a shroud, and, for some unfathomable reason, taped a plastic sword from a Halloween costume next to him. Then I waited until sundown. At around 8:30 p.m., I wheeled the canoe down to the water's edge with a dolly, lit 2 torches, from a pack I had left over from a themed barbecue, and pushed off. And then everything went to hell. First, the fire. I thought I'd timed it perfectly. I lit the kindling right as the canoe drifted out, expecting a slow, majestic blaze. Instead, the thing went up like a Michael Bay movie. Turns out, drywood plus accelerant plus t-shirt shroud equals instant inferno. The canoe started disintegrating before it even got 30 feet out. Second, I didn't account for wind. A gust blew toward the shore, sending flaming bits of canoe back toward me. I had to dodge burning debris while trying to look somber. Third, and this is the part that still haunts me, a family of 4 was on an evening walk on the other side of the lake. I didn't see them until I heard the kid yell, "Mommy, that man set a cat on fire." I panicked. I tried to run, tripped over my own torch, fell in the mud, and got up looking like I had just crawled out of the underworld. The dad shouted something, I couldn't hear what, but the whole family bolted. I'm pretty sure they thought I was summoning demons. To top it all off, a park ranger showed up. Apparently someone else had called it in as a possible satanic ritual. I spent an hour explaining what happened. He did not find the words Viking funeral reassuring. I didn't get arrested, thankfully, but I did get a very stern warning, a lecture on open flames, and a threat of a fine if I ever incinerated an animal corpse in public again. I got home around 11 p.m., reeking of smoke, covered in soot, shoes full of lake mud. I didn't even make it up the steps before Helen opened her door. She smiled. "Thank you," she said. I watched from the window. It was beautiful. I just nodded, unable to speak, my mind still reeling from the sight of a burning canoe spinning in circles on Sparrow Lake while a child screamed in the distance. Now every time I walk through the neighborhood, I get suspicious looks from parents and nods of strange approval from two old men who saw me cart the canoe back the next morning. One of them whispered, "Odin would be proud. Mr. Tibbles, I hope you're prowling the mead halls of Valhalla, knocking over goblets and swatting at celestial laser pointers. You got the send-off I wish I could forget. But I never will." Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos. Also, leave a comment, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.